The rain could not stop him. The rain came down hard that night. A delivery man stood soaked on a stranger's porch, clutching a paper bag like it carried his entire world. The woman inside yelled at him, demanded he leave. But then in a voice that trembled more than the rain, he whispered, "It's for my sick daughter." Ethan Walker never thought life would turn this heavy at 32. Once a bright-eyed musician with dreams of stadium lights, now he was just a delivery driver in a second-hand raincoat, pedaling his bike through storms. His wife, Emily, had passed away 2 years ago from complications after childbirth, leaving behind their daughter, Lily. Lily was 5 now, small for her age, with eyes too big for her fragile frame. She had a rare lung condition, one that kept her from running like other kids. Nights were the worst. Shallow breaths, wheezing, Ethan sitting by her bedside with an inhaler and a prayer, bills stacked high on the counter. Hospital visits drained what little he earned. Yet every time he looked at Lily's smile, thin but stubborn, he found another mile in his tired legs. Tonight, though, the storm was merciless. Water poured from the skies as if heaven itself was weeping, and Ethan, soaked to the bone, gripped the brown paper bag tighter, knowing what was inside wasn't just food. It was medicine disguised as dinner. The city lights blurred through sheets of rain. Ethan pedaled harder, shoes slipping on the pedals. His backpack carried 2 small things: Lily's prescribed food supplements and the single sandwich he'd saved from lunch. He couldn't afford delivery insurance, so every trip was a gamble. If he failed, it was his paycheck at stake. But tonight wasn't just about a paycheck. Lily's medicine was waiting at the pharmacy, and he had one last delivery to make before he could afford it. His phone buzzed with her babysitter's message, "She's coughing more tonight." The street narrowed, lined with houses glowing warm behind frosted windows. Ethan stopped at the address on his screen, a large 2-story home with trimmed hedges and a glowing porch light. The storm had muddied the walkway and his shoes squelched as he climbed the steps. He rang the bell, chest heaving, hair plastered to his forehead. The door swung open. A woman stood there, polished, sharp-eyed, anger simmering as she looked him up and down. "You're late," she snapped, voice cutting through the rain. Cold food, worthless service. Ethan opened his mouth, but only rainwater and exhaustion poured out. She didn't wait. "Do you realize people pay good money for this? And you show up dripping like a stray dog? My husband could have—" Her words sliced him, but Ethan just stood there, gripping the paper bag as though it were his daughter's hand. Silence stretched, broken only by thunder. The woman crossed her arms. "Say something. Or leave." Ethan's lips trembled. His voice was barely louder than the storm. "Please." "It's for my sick daughter." The words hung heavy, fragile yet unshakable. For a moment her anger faltered, eyes flicking to the bag, then to the man who looked less like a delivery worker and more like someone clinging to the last threads of dignity. She scoffed softly, as if trying to bury her hesitation. "Everyone has a sob story." She reached for the bag. Ethan let go, his hand trembling, water dripping onto the welcome mat. But before she could slam the door, headlights swept the driveway. A small face pressed against the window of a car, a boy coughing into a tissue. The woman froze. Ethan saw it too, and for the first time she didn't look like an enemy. She looked like a mother who remembered. The boy burst through the car door, rushing toward the porch despite the rain. "Mom!" he cried, clutching his chest. She spun, alarm breaking her stern mask. Ethan instinctively bent down, steadying the boy's shoulders, shielding him from the storm with his own soaked jacket. The woman's voice cracked. "Daniel, you shouldn't be outside." Ethan looked up, his eyes softer now. "He reminds me of Lily," he whispered. She blinked. "Who?" "My daughter. She's waiting for me tonight. I'm late for the pharmacy, but I needed this delivery to cover her medicine." His voice wavered, honest, stripped bare. "If I fail—" "She doesn't sleep easy tonight." Silence wrapped the porch. The rain slowed as if listening. The woman's lips parted, her anger melting into something heavier. Guilt, recognition. Daniel coughed harder, leaning into Ethan's chest like he'd known him forever. For a second, their worlds blurred. The wealthy family and the man who had nothing but a bike and a daughter. The woman's eyes softened, tears threatening to fall. "Come inside," she said quietly. It wasn't a demand. It was a surrender. The warmth of the living room hit Ethan like a wave. Firelight flickered against polished floors, a chandelier casting soft light over expensive furniture. His shoes left muddy imprints, and he instinctively tried to wipe them on the rug before stepping further. Daniel curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket his mother fetched in haste. She kept glancing between him and Ethan, torn between shame and gratitude. "You said, Lily?" she asked carefully, almost afraid of the answer. Ethan nodded, pulling out his phone. The screen lit with a photo. A frail little girl in pajamas holding a toy stethoscope, pretending to check her stuffed bear's heartbeat. Her smile was crooked but brave. "She's 5. Born early. Lungs never fully developed," Ethan explained softly. "Her mother didn't make it. So it's just us." The woman stared at the photo. For the first time, her sharp features softened into grief of her own. "I lost my husband last year," she whispered, eyes distant. "Cancer. Daniel's been my only reason to keep going." Ethan met her gaze. Two strangers soaked in storms, realizing they carried the same weight. She introduced herself as Grace Miller. Her home was wide, filled with paintings and grand furniture. Yet her voice carried emptiness no chandelier could fill. Ethan sat stiffly at the edge of the armchair, afraid to wet the fabric. Grace poured him tea, her hands trembling. "I shouldn't have yelled," she admitted quietly. It's hard carrying it alone." Ethan sipped the tea, warmth sliding into his bones. "I understand. Some nights I pedal in the rain, wondering if it's even worth it. But then I see Lily's smile, and suddenly nothing else matters." Daniel peeked from his blanket, coughing lightly. "You're a delivery man, right?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, buddy. But at home I'm just a dad who tells silly stories." Daniel grinned faintly. Grace blinked fast, swallowing tears. For the first time, her home didn't feel empty. A clock ticked on the wall. The pharmacy would close soon. Ethan stood, regret heavy in his chest. "I need to go." "Her medicine," Grace interrupted. "No, you won't bike through this storm again tonight." She picked up her keys. "We're driving you." The car ride was quiet, filled only with the hum of tires against wet asphalt. Ethan sat in the back, dripping water onto leather seats, clutching the paper bag like a lifeline. Grace drove, eyes fixed ahead, while Daniel leaned against the window, sneaking curious glances at Ethan. Streetlights flickered across Ethan's tired face. His mind replayed Lily's wheezing, the way she clutched her chest when the air felt too heavy. He whispered a silent prayer. "Please let me make it in time." Grace's voice broke the silence. "You work nights in storms like this. All for her?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Every mile. Every raindrop. I'd do it again tomorrow if it means she wakes up smiling." Grace's hands tightened on the wheel. "You shouldn't have to." The pharmacy lights glowed ahead, faint but steady like a lighthouse. As they pulled in, Ethan exhaled deeply. Grace parked, but before he could bolt inside, she placed a hand on his arm. Her voice was low, steady. "Ethan, let me help." Inside the pharmacy, the fluorescent lights hummed. Ethan stepped to the counter, dripping water, handing over crumpled bills. "Prescription for Lily Walker." The pharmacist glanced at the money, then at the receipt. "You're short." Ethan froze. His heart sank. He'd counted twice. It should have been enough. The storm had delayed one delivery earlier. His pay hadn't processed. His hands shook as he pulled coins from his pocket. "Still short?" Grace stepped forward quietly. "Put it on my account," she said firmly. Ethan spun to protest, but her gaze silenced him. "Not pity, resolve." The pharmacist nodded, bagging the medicine. Ethan's fingers curled around it like it was oxygen itself. Tears burned his eyes, but he held them back. "Thank you," he whispered, voice breaking. Grace smiled faintly. Every parent deserves to breathe easier at night. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Ethan stared up at the clouds, then back at Grace and Daniel. In that moment, it didn't feel like charity. It felt like two broken worlds holding each other up. Back at Ethan's apartment, the contrast was stark. Peeling wallpaper, a leaky faucet dripping into a rusted sink, and a small bed where Lily lay curled under thin blankets. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. Ethan knelt beside her, brushing damp curls from her forehead. "Daddy's here, Lily. I've got your medicine." Her eyes fluttered open, weak but relieved. Grace and Daniel stood in the doorway, silent witnesses to a world far from their polished home. Daniel tugged his mother's sleeve. "She looks like me when I'm sick." Grace swallowed hard, her gaze darting across the cluttered kitchen, the unpaid bills on the counter. Ethan gave Lily the medicine, whispering stories about princesses who fought dragons with laughter. Slowly, her breathing steadied. Grace's eyes welled. She stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You shouldn't be alone in this." Ethan looked up, exhaustion etched deep in his face. "But I am." Grace shook her head. "Not anymore." Days passed. Grace began visiting after work, bringing groceries and sitting with Lily while Ethan delivered orders. Daniel, once shy, now sat cross-legged on the floor, teaching Lily board games between coughs and giggles. The sound of children's laughter filled Ethan's small home for the first time in years. One evening, Ethan returned early, pausing at the door. Inside, Grace was helping Lily draw rainbows with broken crayons, while Daniel read aloud from a storybook. For a moment, Ethan leaned against the wall, overwhelmed. His home no longer felt like a battlefield of bills and beeping machines. It felt alive. Grace noticed him and smiled. "Dinner's ready." "Don't argue." They ate simple soup at the tiny table, knees almost touching. Grace caught his tired gaze and whispered, "You're stronger than you think." Ethan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I'm just a man who pedals through storms." Grace held his eyes. "No, Ethan. You're a man who refuses to let the storm win." But whispers began in Grace's circle. Friends questioned her visits. A delivery man? In that neighborhood? Colleagues raised eyebrows when she left work early. "You're slipping, Grace." One evening, as she packed a basket for Lily, her sister confronted her. "You're letting grief blind you. That man can't give you stability." "He's drowning." Grace's jaw tightened. "And yet he still shows up." "Even in the rain." Meanwhile, Ethan wrestled with his own doubts. He'd catch his reflection, soaked jacket, calloused hands, weary eyes, and wonder if he deserved the kindness Grace offered. One night he whispered to Lily, "What if I can't keep this up?" She looked at him with sleepy eyes, clutching her teddy bear. "But Daddy." "You always do." The words pierced him deeper than any storm. Maybe the world saw a man too broken, but to Lily he was still her shelter. The real test came one evening when Ethan's bike chain snapped mid-delivery. Rain pelted the pavement, thunder rolling. He fell hard, skin scraping asphalt. Pain shot up his leg, but the bag in his hand remained intact. He limped the last block, dragging the broken bike beside him. The customer frowned at the delay. "Terrible service," they muttered, slamming the door. Ethan stood in the rain, bleeding, gripping the empty bag. His phone buzzed. "Grace." "Where are you?" "Daniel wants to show Lily his new drawing." He hesitated, staring at the storm. His leg throbbed. But then Lily's laugh echoed faintly through the phone. He straightened, wincing, and whispered, "On my way." By the time he reached home, soaked and limping, Grace saw the blood and gasped, "Ethan!" She rushed to him, hands trembling as she cleaned his wound. He tried to joke, voice weak. "The rain couldn't stop me." Her eyes filled. She whispered, "Maybe it's time you let someone hold the umbrella for you." Grace made a decision. The next day, she walked into her office, past whispering colleagues, and handed in her resignation. She'd run the firm since her husband's death, but it had never filled the hollow ache in her chest. "I've found something more important," she told the board, her voice unwavering. That evening, she arrived at Ethan's with boxes of books, toys, and medical supplies. Ethan blinked, stunned. "Grace, what are you doing?" She set the boxes down, her voice steady but soft. "Building a new life. If you'll let me." Ethan's chest tightened. "I have nothing to offer you but this." He gestured at the cracked walls, the broken bike. Grace stepped closer, eyes glistening. "You've already given me more. You reminded me love doesn't live in polished houses. It lives in the fight to keep going." Daniel hugged Lily, both children giggling under the flicker of the dim light. And for the first time, Ethan allowed himself to believe storms could end. Months passed. Lily grew stronger, her cheeks filling with color. Ethan found steadier work at a repair shop, leaving behind endless storms on his bike. Grace began tutoring local kids from Ethan's living room, turning it into a space of laughter and learning. One evening, as rain tapped the windows, they all sat together, Lily between Ethan and Grace. Daniel sprawled on the rug with crayons. The storm outside felt distant, no longer something to fear. Ethan reached for Grace's hand under the table. She squeezed it gently, her smile quiet but sure. "Remember that night you yelled at me?" he teased softly. Grace laughed through tears. "I remember the night you whispered about Lily. That's the night everything changed." The rain softened outside, like applause fading after a song. For once, Ethan wasn't racing against the storm. He was sitting in its calm, finally home. On Lily's 6th birthday, they gathered in the small apartment that now overflowed with warmth. Balloons brushed the ceiling, the cake small but glowing with candles. Lily took a deep breath, steady, strong, and blew them all out. Cheers filled the room. Ethan closed his eyes, tears slipping free. He remembered every storm, every night of fear, every mile pedaled in the rain, and now here was Lily laughing alive, surrounded by love he once thought impossible. Grace wrapped her arm around him, whispering, "The rain could never stop you." Ethan kissed Lily's forehead, his voice breaking but sure, "No storm ever will." The room erupted with song, children's laughter spilling louder than thunder. Outside, the rain had stopped. For the first time in years, Ethan realized storms weren't meant to drown him. They were meant to prove he could rise, and he did. If this story touched your heart, remember, storms don't last forever, but love does. Drop a comment sharing who you thought of while listening. Don't forget to hit subscribe, press the bell icon, and share this story with someone who needs to know. The rain cannot stop them either.